Good morning. Is anyone alive out there? Yes. Great. Hi Emma, Martin. Look at this. I thought I'd start today by sharing with you something which I find just so stunningly beautiful. Does anyone know what that is? I mean, it's clearly a leaf. But, anyway, there we are. I found some more as well. In fact, I collected quite a few. I thought they were so lovely. Oh, look at those. It's really nice if you hold it up against the sky, but I think I can see what happened if I do that. The camera will fall over. And so, yeah, it's a real challenge, I'm finding, doing these live things. So, yeah, it's a leaf skeleton, and yes, it is Rebecca, and really, probably one of the most beautiful leaf skeletons I've seen before. So I went out the other day, and I saw an absolutely stunningly beautiful magnolia tree. And yeah, when you're working with wild foods or kind of maybe non-native plants that you could use as food that have a tradition elsewhere, yeah. You can look at kind of garden plants sometimes. So yeah, this was under a big magnolia. And when I was under it the other day, it was so beautiful. The blooms were at their absolute peak. And yeah, you just wanted to just behold the beauty of it and drink it in. But yeah, there's been a few hard frosts, and just in a day, that magnolia has just all kind of wilted, and the blossoms anyway have gone brown. So I can't kind of do the infusions and lacto ferments of the blossoms that I planned. But the thing I really liked about it, two things, is I mentioned how this had happened to magnolias around me, to a friend online, and he saying, and someone jumped in and said their father used to go out on frosty mornings and like hose down the magnolia to defrost the blossoms before the sun came out. So yeah, and then they didn't kind of go brown in the sun, which I really loved. And the other thing is, although I started noticing these around like a few days ago, I wasn't quite sure where they came from. So when I stood by the magnolia and all the wilted blossoms, I kind of, normally I'm so captivated by that that really I'm kind of one-track minded and a bit blinkered and don't kind of look around. And then I discovered the beautiful leaf I'd seen before. It was magnolia. Anyway, there we are. That's just an intro. So today we're going to talk about several things, and both plants and fungi. Now, something happened this morning, which is quite funny. It's I kind of became the victim of my own advice, or my own advice coming to kind of bite me in the bum and prove that it actually is quite good advice, but as we all know, we don't always follow our own advice. So I was here a couple of days ago, and there are a couple of really nice fungi that I wanted to show you, and then through that look at using a systematic key. And one of them was actually quite a difficult species. It was glistening inkcap. And anyway, it was like there was a whole lovely cluster of them on Monday, just about a metre from where I am now. And now, absolutely no evidence of them whatsoever. And yeah, the advice I often give people and give myself, and I've come a cropper in terms of doing this kind of live broadcast, is quite often when you're working with wild plants, you might have an idea of what you want to go out and find, the recipes you might want to make. But to a large extent, yeah, it can work to have, an idea in your mind. But very often, the very thing that you're looking for is not there. And even when you thought it definitely would be. So, and actually, that's the opportunity to find something else, like those gorgeous leaves, or just be open to kind of working with what is actually there. That's it. It's like being in the moment, isn't it? But kind of one aspect of it with foraging. So I will talk briefly about a couple of fungi, and then something that's been on my mind a lot, which is getting to know plants and kind of more conventional approaches in art culture and other approaches as well. So I think we'll start with the fungi first, because the other thing that's here, and it's kind of relevant as well, because sometimes in identifying fungi, now fungi can grow on the ground, on trees, living trees, tree stumps, all over the place. But sometimes, particularly when they're growing on trees, they're quite specific to the species they grow on. So the one which you might even be able to see just behind my head, when I put my hand out there, it's actually growing on an ash. And I know it's an ash simply because these are growing on it. And that's useful because I'd like to talk about ash as well, because as an edible plant. Because although I mentioned earlier that it's good just to work with what's there, also what's good is if you have the knowledge of what you can do with various plants, then you can be pre-prepared. So I'll be talking about some things we can eat from ash that might not be there now, but that will help you when you are on your daily permitted exercise, if it's a walk or a cycle, and you're cycling past an ash, you can start putting them on your potential map of where wild food plants are. So let's first look at one of these fungi that grows on ash, and Lucia, and see if I can do this without knocking everything over. It's hard to tell what you can see. There's plants in the way. Well, there we are. So that's really nice. So we've got this one here, which is kind of a lighter brown than the one here. Actually, can you hear that sound difference? Look at that. Never done this before. Difference in sound. Because one thing I'll mention earlier is like working with wild plants is really to make it a sensory experience. Engage your senses. And I often say, there's smell, there's touch, there's sight, there's taste, but sound doesn't play a part. So actually I'm really pleased. I just discovered an instance where there's a difference in sound. So the difference in sound there was, so here's one I picked earlier. Again, it's slightly browner than this other one. And the reason is that this one that makes a kind of less hollow sound is full of moisture. It's full of moisture because it hasn't yet spored. And a lot of you will know this fungus. It's called King Alfred's cake, and there's a kind of great story that goes with that. I'm not going to tell it. But it's funny, I was talking to a friend the other day. There's a course that we're devising that we've put back for obvious reasons, which is wild food and storytelling. I'm just slicing through this at the moment. Look at that. Can you see them? Can you see those circles? I've kind of mashed up the middle portion a little bit, so you can't quite see so clearly the. Oh, actually, look on this bit. You see those concentric bands, or what would be circles if it was coming from the middle. Yeah. There's Daldinia concentrica. And I've just kind of partly ruined my whole plan by telling you what it is. But yeah, I wonder if using what I was going to suggest, we can find it. It's I think I've told you the common name as well. I can't remember what I'm doing from one moment to the next. But anyway, one thing I'm kind of quite pleased that my plan was scuppered is when I look back at my last video, I realised, and I don't know how to do this yet, I realised that when I was showing text that everything is reversed. But I'm going to just briefly talk you through this guide. Look, and it's called Mushrooms, an Initial Guide to the Identification of Mushrooms and Toadstools, and it's by Paul Nickel, and it's the 4th edition. He's regularly creating new editions on the feedback that he gets from the people that he leads on walks. I've worked with Paul before. It's really great fun, incredibly knowledgeable guy. So, and this, I use this a lot when I'm running courses, because there are so many species of fungi, and actually to just get down to the genus of a fungi can actually be quite challenging sometimes. Hi Lisa. So what do you do? Like initially, what do you do? Like what I used to do, like years ago, I used to find a mushroom or fungi. I'd get a book like Roger Phillips' Wild Food, and I would flick through like for ages, thinking I could just kind of find it by the picture, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. So a more systematic approach is useful. So let's look at this. And then we get on to why it's nice to identify this and recognise an ash tree. Indeed, not only that, we will. Where did I put it? Somewhere. Yeah. And we look more kind of botanically identifying ash as well. So this key just asks simple questions, and so we'll just spend a couple of minutes on this because it's really good. Highly recommend it if you're a beginner to identifying fungi. So he's very helpful in this edition. Put lots of photos to make your initial selection. So he's got these statements that you kind of form as a question. Yeah, I'm going to write. I know I say this every time, but it's taken me a while to get up to speed with the whole technicalities of this. But I finally worked out how not to delete these videos or save really poor quality ones. So I am going to put this up on YouTube, and I am going to put some links, particularly today, because there's some things I'm going to talk about that are a little bit, I guess, challenging. Some would say controversial. So actually, the links are kind of crucial to look at the detail of what I'm covering. So anyway, so looking at this mushroom, it asks us. So this mushroom, right now, whether it's your conventional mushroom that you're thinking about, with a cap and a stem and gills, or like tubes underneath, like spongy underneath, or like spines underneath, or it's a round ball, or it's like a shelf. Doesn't matter. Like that thing is like the fruiting body. Fruiting in the sense that what comes from that is like it's the fruit that's born from mycelium in a sense, and then it has the equivalent of what in plants would be seeds, but in fungi is spores. So it's the reproductive part in a sense. Although my goodness, like fungi reproduction is incredibly complicated. But so it asks, like in this key, it says, is the fruit body a cap with distinct gills? So distinct gills, kind of like this. These are the gills, like underneath. With or without a stalk. So, fruit body a cap with distinct gills. I reckon you see any gills there? I don't. No, I'm going to go no with that one. So then it says, does the fruit body have a stalk and a cap, but without gills? Well, again, is there any stalk there? My finger pretending to be a stalk. I would say no. Definitely no. So key 3. So key is it's going to take us to an area where we can kind of refine our search. So is that the fruit body a stalk in a head region, but without a cap? It's got these wonderful fungi here, like that, the penis-shaped phallus stinkhorn, which is an amazing fungi to find and smell and learn about, and at Halloween get the egg stage and put it on people's walls and let the penis hatch out, like away from where you found it, like over a couple of days. It's like, that's one of my favourite fungi games to play. Is it that? No. Fruit body forming a bracket. Well, if I'm a tree, like, is it growing out like a kind of shelf or something like that? No, it's not. So then, key 5 says, is the fruit body hemispherical, spherical, or pestle shaped? Kind of like that. Oh look, some pictures. What do you reckon? What do you reckon? Key 5. Yes, I would say it is. It's definitely that hemispherical. So key 5. Let's have a look at that. So key 1 actually looks at ones with gills and gill attachment. Key 5, where are we? Key 5. So here we are. So this is what they kind of look like. It doesn't matter that it's backwards. You can see that they're simple, flowing arrow kind of flows to ask different questions. Usually a yes or no. So it's like really simple, really simple. That's why I love it. So it's key 5, and it asks, is this fungus like a cauliflower? Like a cauliflower? That would be nice. No. If it was, it would be a cauliflower fungus. Is the fruit body black in spheres? Yes. Are they less than 1 centimetre? No. Okay, so that just takes us straight to there, like immediately, and we get to Daldinia. That's simple. Now, then what you would do is go to, I don't know, a larger mushroom guide like this. It's a lovely one by Andy Overall, came out recently. Just gorgeous pictures. Look at those. Marvellous. And then kind of look up Daldinia, and I'm not going to do it just now. Shall I do it just now? Why not? I will do it just now. And the only thing I would say, that even like the best guide, I've never yet come across a guide that says how many members of that genus there are. 5, 4, 6. At the time of writing, or roughly, I mean, because it's always disputed, it's always changing. 5, 4, 6. Yeah, that's great. And he's got the two Daldinia species. So we go to the genus Daldinia, and we've got one there, which is Daldinia concentrica, the one that we've got that grows on ash. And over the page, he's got another Daldinia, this one at the top, which grows on gorse, burnt wood, burnt gorse. So it's amazing. It's amazing mushroom because I think, particularly when I'm doing stuff with kids and thinking about fungi, I tend to look, because I think we live in a culture that's quite get native, the hatching penis fungi, not this one, but the one in the book, the Phallus impudicus, the stinkhorn. Yeah, it's to do playful things like with fungi. So, that I've just mentioned, the stinkhorn, that you can get the eggs when they're called witches' eggs around Halloween, actually through the summer. But Halloween's really good because they're still there. And yeah, you can put them on people's walls and their flower pots on their doorsteps, and if they don't move them for a couple of days, like that big penis just kind of breaks out of the egg and like it erects itself. I think that's a really fun, playful thing to do, and like kids love that. So, and then you can use fungi for natural dyeing, for like colour, not death. No, not good when you're teaching kids or anyone, or yourself. Natural colour for paper making, for paint making, for fire starting. So there's lots of ways to work with fungi, like before you even start thinking about fungi in terms of food. So this is a good one that's at a kind of entry point for doing something kind of interesting beyond thinking about food. But I think when you are particularly, when we're thinking about engaging people with wild foods and the natural world in particular, restoring vital connection is that kind of tag phrase that we use at the Association of Foragers that I belong to, which is a really lovely phrase, really, is I think a lot of that connection that we find can come both through play and learning traditional skills, traditional ways that plants and fungi would have been used, and also, like, as a child, really inspiring children. And like all children, probably not all children, most children, absolutely love fire, playing with fire. So I'll just show you briefly like how you can make like fire out of this. So this is not working with these really moist ones that haven't spored yet. But those really moist ones that haven't spored yet, another thing that you could do with them, I think of them, by the way, as like the limpet of the fungi kingdom. You kind of need a sharp knife to kind of pry them off the trunks or wood or stumps where they are, just like you would a limpet. But those kind of dense browner ones haven't spored yet, and they're not going to be suitable for creating fire. But what they are really good for is if you get them off when they are like this. And I find the bigger ones, like, the better. I mean, they can get as big as that, or even kind of like that. Is if you put them on a plate or a tray or something, and just leave them for anything from like a few days to a couple of weeks, they will sporulate. That means like the spores will come out, and unlike gill fungi, where the spores drop down from the gills on King Alfred's cakes, they kind of form like on the top, and just one day you will kind of wake up and you will see it looks like someone's dusted the whole thing with black icing sugar all over the top and a little ring around, actually even like that far away. So don't put it anywhere where you don't want the spores to, all the really dark black spores to where you don't want them to be, basically. Keep it contained on a tray or something. But those you can mix with oil or water, and you can make a wonderful paint with them. So really, really good. But to use them for fire, what you kind of do is you you kind of create a little bit of dust like that. I'll also tell you how this has a kind of extreme wild food kind of slant to it in a minute. Let's just try and do this. If I try and tell you while I'm doing it, is that, well, you need to put this on a flat surface. Let's see if I can just get it there. Can you see it there? You can't see it there. Right, where can you see it? Let me try and do this. Look, there we are. Put it there. So I was working, I can see this might be a disaster. I just got it balanced right there. I was working with William Grant Distillers for a couple of years, and we were doing, making kind of wild cocktails, going out and getting loads of plants and making wild cocktails. And we kind of found this at this time of year, like I've got a fire steel, pretty basic one. And we're making all sorts of botanical syrups to make cocktails. Oh look, there we are. See that? I've got a few sparks there, and then just let the wind do its magic. Just lighting it further. I'm resisting the temptation to blow it at this point until it's really caught properly, because sometimes you get an ember in there and you blow it to encourage it and you just blow them all away. So just letting the wind do its thing. But anyway, so we made this guy. He was serving like wild inspired cocktails in his bar in London, with King Alfred's cakes smoking on the bar, just for some atmosphere. And the thing I loved about that is, I'll show you this in a minute when it gets really red hot, and then we'll talk about ash that this is growing on. The thing I loved about that, it was bringing like a tradition. I mean, these have been used by our ancestors for like thousands of years to carry an ember. Some people say to keep the ember from one fire in there to kind of go and light another fire somewhere else, or perhaps just for the initial starting of the fire, and then putting like, maybe birch bark or bits of dry grass around this and blowing, and all the kind of bushcrafty thing you see people doing. Except then it wasn't bushcraft, it was just living. So that's well and truly alight now. So I'll just leave that smouldering while I tell you about the ash. And the ash tree. So King Alfred's cakes, or cramp balls, also called. So ash. Ash has been a wonderful plant for me over the years. It's one thing I do, I make a lot of is various pickles. So, sometimes that can be quite fiddly. I remember like pickling dandelion buds like a couple of times and a bit of a fiddle just to get like a big jar. Whereas some things are so easy and worthwhile in terms of flavour that it's good to use those. And the ash is one of those ones, and a particular part of the ash. But just before we move on to that, I just want to show you this beautiful stump, because actually what drew me here to this ash in the first place, and this is often the way with wild plants, it's just felt cooled in by the sheer beauty of this lovely stump. Right, look at it. Look at this. Look at that. Right, get out of the way. Sometimes it's always best when I just get out of the way, and the plant takes centre stage. Look in there. So have a look around in there. So I was both drawn to the beauty of this lovely stump, but also, it's not always just the beauty. It was kind of practical as well, because another thing to look out for on ash, apart from King Alfred's cakes at this time of the year, is a lovely, lovely edible mushroom called dryad saddle, which I expect is causing the rot in this ash. So now's the time. If you find not necessarily it's going to be in the rotten part of the ash. It might be, but it could just be on a stump of a big ash, or even on a kind of living ash, which is probably going to die at some point. Certainly one that's on its way out as a living tree. So yeah, that's one that forms a kind of bracket. Just look it up. Dryad saddle. If you look at my kind of Instagram feed, there's a ridiculous picture of me looking kind of all tanned and about 25 years younger with Kelly Brook, where we went and found some in her bluebell wood on the ash, and we actually cooked them. But we also made paper from the older ones, which was really good fun. So I mentioned earlier that making paper out of fungi is another fun thing, a fun way in, particularly with kids or enthusiastic adults who like crafts, instead of initially going straight for the food aspect of wild fungi. And bypassing that whole thing about worries about poisonings and all the rest of it, just inspire about fungi generally first, and and not just. Oh gosh, I know, because I don't want to just kind of ramble on for forever, but not just in terms of their utility, in terms of human use, whether for food or medicine or crafts, but just how amazing they are in themselves. Just recycling. Recycling the woodland and allowing a whole load of other species to grow, and basically I think we wouldn't be here on this planet if there weren't fungi. So they're amazing. I brought it all back to humans again. They're just marvellous in themselves. So forgive me, fungi, you are just supreme, wonderful beings, irrespective of whether we are around or not, and I admire you greatly. But let's talk about ash. Here we are. So it has this kind of grey-green bark, these kind of pear leaf buds, just slightly, not right opposite, but pretty much opposite. Slight. And there's the terminal one. To scale. And they're very kind of dark brown, sometimes almost black, which will just focus a bit better. Anyway, there we are. In fact, it's kind of interesting. They're probably as brown. Look, they're as brown as an unsporulated King Alfred's cake. Sometimes, not in this case, but sometimes they can be as black as a dry and sporulated King Alfred's cake. So ash. This is another one where I tried to do this last night because I was gonna do it live on this video. Another way in, before even thinking about wild plants as food, is again like the other crafts, and I was going to make an ash whistle because it's really fun. One's a bit thicker than this, probably twice as thick as this. You can just kind of slice it off, cut with a knife, bang the outer wood to kind of loosen it a bit, twist it, take it off, do various other things, and have a poacher's whistle. And I tried to do that last night, and it just wasn't ready. It tends to work better as they're coming into leaf up until about midsummer, when the wood is a lot more sappy. It was just too early at the moment. But anyway, the reason I love ash, I'm getting back to the pickle idea, is now where are they? Oh look, it just so happens behind this stump some ash pickles. So you probably, I think, for those of you that know, you will know, so it's kind of obvious. But when we're thinking about trees that have seeds, I think one that we're really familiar with is sycamore. You know those like kind of helicopter, the ones that kind of come down like a helicopter. Well, ash has something similar, and they hang in bunches, and because of that, they're referred to commonly as ash keys. So here are some ash keys, looking very similar to how they were colour-wise and when I picked them, but just a little bit more olive. Well, actually quite a lot more olivey rather than the more kind of vibrant green. They're pretty much as green as the plants that you can see there when I picked them. But pickling them and boiling them has made them go that colour. So look, let's just isolate one and have a look. Look at the size of it. I find our nose is really good for like scale. Like, it's not good for like, I was going to like flip it like some kind of strange wild animal and eat it. But there we are. Aha. So that's something. I'll tell you how to make those. These are so delicious. Right? These are so good. So the reason it makes a really good pickle is that not every year, but usually kind of every other year, a tree, now we're going to get into like whether an ash is male or female, because I actually read that they can change sex in the season, but the ones that are producing these, the keys, the seeds, will be doing it in terms of a really massive crop, usually every 2-3 years. And then, right, honestly, just from one tree you could pick enough ash keys to make pickles to last you like 20 years, honestly. So, really simple. And to do this, what I've done is I've waited until they... Well, actually, I have seen, like, even in London, like about 3 weeks ago now, some ash keys that were on the new growth, new ash keys that were on the bush, but they were literally like about 1 millimetre. And so typically, yeah, London is just a bit kind of milder, but typically you'd gather them, I'd say, in the end of April through May is a good time, while they're still nice and tender. And there's a test you can do. I'm just grabbing another one down here just so I can show you actually. And this is just, I'm going to tell you about something that you could pick as well at the same time in a minute. But so by nice and tender, what I mean is, I don't know if you can see, like, yeah, you probably can, I can see it, so you must be able to. You see the tonal difference in here. It's kind of darker there. You've got the seed in there, essentially, which is about the size of a sunflower seed. So you might see these in, and this will grow, this will get bigger. This will probably can get up to double that size. And yeah, actually working with fungi and plants, sometimes there's that temptation that you think, well, you know, I found that the plant or the fungi that I want to work with, and you know, I'm going to leave it till it gets a little bit bigger. With fungi, what can happen? That it doesn't get bigger; it just gets eaten, or by fungi or by other humans, or but in terms of plants, sometimes waiting for things to get bigger doesn't always work. And this is a great example. There was a lovely ash tree in my mother's garden, and it was so laden with ash keys, and I thought, oh, perfect. But I'll just wait for them to get a little bit bigger. And it was so interesting because in the time I waited for them to get, basically, I thought, no, I'm not coming back for a few days. Actually, for a few weeks. So, like, waiting for them to get bigger won't work, but I'll do it tomorrow. Mañana. I love mañana, but it doesn't always work. It doesn't always work. Now is often the time. Now, when it comes to wild food, because I did wait a day, and after a day, and I'll show you what I'm talking about in a minute. I did the test I do to see if it is tender, and what I do, and if it's tender, it's going to be useful for pickling. Is I bite just above that sunflower-like bit. Obviously, it's not. This one's cooked, but imagine this is raw and just from the tree. And if it doesn't come away just with an averagely hard bite, just cleanly, it's too tough, you have to pull it. It's just going to not make a pickle. But just in a day, like I tried them the day before and they were all fine, and like the following day, like every single cluster on the ash tree that I tried was like too tough and couldn't be used. So it just kind of showed me that like now is often the time. So look out for that in May. And what I do is I boil them for about 30 seconds, throw away the water. That just moderates the bitterness. And then I pickle them in any kind of nice vinegar, cider vinegar, white wine vinegar, any vinegar you like, really. Usually with a little bit of sugar and some chili. But, you know, I'm sure you've all got your favourite kind of pickle mixes, pickling spice mixes and vinegar you like to use. So that's really good because the other thing I do is, like, when I make a salad or something, rather than put on a conventional salad dressing, I tend to just put on some nice oil, olive oil or something, and then some random wild pickles. So that would be one. As you probably saw me eating earlier, though, when you have pickled them, the stem at the top is quite tough. So if you're going to put them in a salad, you just need to pull off like the bottom ones and sprinkle them on. Or they're really nice on a cheese board, and then you can just have your cheese and you can just drag them off the stem like that. So it's really, really nicely. The other thing that's really lovely, I mean, I'm just going to stop for a second, see if there's any questions. And I'm going to go through. Could you cook them or eat the ash keys raw also? Could you cook them? Yeah, you could cook them and eat them. All sorts of ways. I mean, raw, I guess the answer, I don't know. I mean, I'm just looking at something that, yeah, we'll come on to this a bit. We're going to talk about this a bit later. It's like, yeah, the first recipe I came across for pickling ash keys was in my favourite wild food guide, which is Wild Food by Roger Phillips. Like the old edition, actually. The other one, the new one, is sexed up a bit and all a bit kind of neat. The other one was a bit kind of rough around the edges and much nicer. But so I found the recipe in there, I believe. And yeah, he's a guy I respect and whose recipes I followed and enjoyed. So I was basing on that. But so yeah, I know about them being used cooked, but raw, I don't know. So yeah, plants for future. That might have the answer. But yeah, but cooking is perfectly safe. Raw, maybe. I don't know. Who's laughing? Why are you laughing? Do you heat them in vinegar? Bring to the boil? No, I don't. I blanch the ash keys in boiling water, just to moderate the bitterness. Now, you might not mind the bitterness, so in which case you could possibly just boil them in the vinegar. But I kind of, yeah, I mean, that's another approach. But anyway, my method, yeah, is that I blanch them for about 15 seconds, 30 seconds, throw away the water, and then just put them in cold vinegar. That's what I do, and it works. So, if you've just joined, we've talked about King Alfred's cakes on ash, and then we've moved on to talk about King Alfred's cakes being a fungus that grows on ash. We've moved on to talk about identifying ash, and then thinking about what we can use from ash food-wise as we go through the season. And coming up right now, probably in London now, and over towards the end of April and throughout May, we're talking about harvesting the ash keys. And another thing, and sometimes when, I've been working with wild food now for about so long. Count the wrinkles. Like this is how 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 21, 22, 24, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, at least 30 years. And so it's not often actually that I come across a food use for a plant that I hadn't known about. It's like, of course it happens, but it's less frequent than it kind of used to be. And because I describe myself as a wild food experimentalist, I always kind of like to experiment with things. And something I discovered, and I'll show you, last year, which was one of my favourite discoveries of the year. Now, bear in mind, so first of all, how did I come upon thinking about this? And that's using the leaves of ash as a food. Here they are. So, one video I'll probably do is on making wild teas. Now that would be like flower teas, leaf teas, and actually different ways of using leaves, not just kind of drying them, but oxidizing them and fermenting them, and then using them as tea. And ash, here's the young leaves of ash, the young sprigs. Look at that. Again, like the keys that have been cooked, these have been cooked and they've gone that kind of olive colour. So this has had a tradition of being used as tea. And the thing I years ago when I was kind of researching teas came across so often was how it used to be used for adulterating like green tea. I guess when green tea wasn't so widely available and it was more expensive, it would be kind of bulked out with kind of ash leaves and probably I reckon probably taken through the same plate, the same kind of method of oxidation. Maybe not, because they do go kind of dark anyway when you kind of dry them. But you can get them to, you can bruise them and oxidize them and make them go very dark like black tea. So they just look like black tea, and I can see how that could be mixed and not noticed. And it's okay as a tea. But the point about that is, there is some tradition there where people aren't being poisoned by having ash leaves, which are cooked, in this case, in tea. So what happened like last year is, wow, that's salty, I'll tell you why. What happened last year is I thought, I'm just going to vary my ash pickle recipe this year by putting some sprigs of new growth from the ash keys. And because the new growth and the ash keys are kind of around at the same time. And so I got a load of the ash leaves and I blanched them in 2 changes of boiling water to moderate that bitterness again. It's slightly bitter. And then I put them in kind of iced water to stop them cooking, and then I kind of dried them and I had them on a towel. And my sister she'd just roasted a whole load of peppers and stuffed with meat and spices and various things. And I said, can I have one? And she said, yeah, if you clean the cooking tray. And so one side of the sink I had this cooking tray I was about to wash. It had all this kind of lovely unctuous, oily spiciness all over it, kind of quite congealed, kind of meaty flavours in there as well. And you know, any flavours. You know, you could have stuffed your peppers with tofu or all sorts of things. But anyway, the point was, it was spicy, it was oily, and the flavours were intensified. So I was just about to wash this, and on the other side on the draining board, I had all these ash leaf bundles ready for putting in the ash key pickles. And I got them, and I just kind of ran them back and forth through this kind of oil. And then I ate them. And I was just astonished at how utterly delicious it was. So delicious. So because of that, this has really gone way up. Well, it wasn't even on my list. Like, it was not on my list of wild vegetables. But had it been, it would have been right down the bottom. And it went rocketed right up to definitely within like the top 10. Partly that was because it was such a wonderful discovery for me. So yeah, check that out. It's really nice. And I'm going to talk about how I've got this. So these aren't pickled. These are just preserved in brine. The reason I did that, I was just experimenting last year, and we'll come on to this in a bit later, with harvesting various kind of leaves and shoots, and not fermenting them, because we could lacto ferment things, but keeping them just as they are without taking them through a process which is going to kind of tenderize them too much, but just kind of keep them as they are. So we'll come on to that a little bit in a minute. But I really wanted to talk today. How long have we been going? Don't know. I realise I could just kind of go on for hours and hours. It's hard to know, what the interest is. At least there's a few of you still around. So what I wanted to talk about is ways of not so much identifying plants, like using keys or going through that really, really busy process, as I do, and have been for years, is where, I come across a plant and I start thinking of it. I mean, this is a useful exercise, but I start thinking of it from top to tail, if you like, from like root to tip, and I think, well, are the roots and tubers edible? Are the are the leaves edible? Are the immature flower buds edible? Are the leaf stems edible? Is the central flowering stem edible? Like the inside? Are the flowers edible? Are the immature seeds edible? Are the mature seeds edible? Can I sprout the mature seeds? Does it have a pollen that's edible? Does it have a sap that I can use? And other aspects too. And basically all these transitional stages, like, that might have a different application, like in the kitchen, but it could be all kind of very busy. And in fact, actually, just before I get on to other ways of approaching plants rather than that, there's something I wanted to show you over here, which kind of illustrates that approach quite well. Where did I put them? Anyway, look, it's these plants that are growing just down here. Let me show you. Look. Show you a leaf. Look. Get back. There's something. Aha. Yeah. So this is a plant that's you find on kind of woodland edge or in the woodland, and so yeah. Just before I move on to an alternative approach of kind of relating to plants, thinking about plants is, yeah, that approach of is the root edible? Is there a tuber that's edible? Is the leaf edible? Is the flower edible? All the rest of it. This kind of illustrates well because you'll see this a lot around now. So we've got. Let me get the flower as well. I make lots of ridiculous noises when I move around. Normally, I'm just not aware of this when I'm filming, and I suddenly become quite aware of it. So, this is celandine, ranunculus ficaria. So, it's in the buttercup family. So it's kind of a little bit buttercup-like, isn't it? Has anyone used this plant before? For any reason? Say for any reason, because I can do something now, which is quite funny, that I do when I'm running wild food courses. And you're probably really safe to do it without embarrassment because you're there, you're not here, you're not standing in the group, you're not standing in the circle to put your hand up and say, me, I do. So yeah, what I have to ask people is another common name for lesser celandine is pilewort. Now, piles are, well, you know what piles are, they're in your bum and they can be really painful. I've never had them. But one way medicinally that people have thought about plants, and some people still do, is in terms of the doctrine of signatures. So that's where, like, the signature being a pattern often in the plant that is similar to something that you might see in the body. And apparently, the little tubers that you get on you dig up, you've got the root and then the little tubers. They look like piles. So I'm going to ask you, I'll do this now, pretend you're not in my group, but you're safely at home. So I'll ask, who here has piles, has had piles? Yeah, silently raise your hands. And did they look like this? Sorry if this is putting you off your breakfast. There we are. So apparently piles look like that. I mean, some people have them cut out. Herbally, I don't know how they've been used to treat piles, whether mashed up and as kind of rubbed on or put on. I just don't know, because fortunately I haven't had them. It's worth looking up. Eaten internally, I doubt it, but who knows. But from a wild food point of view, when I was talking about working from tip to toe, what did I say? I don't know. Yeah, root to tip. So that's my first question would be: are these edible? And yeah, they are. They're kind of like if you cook them. Now, I've pickled them by cooking them first, and I've just had them, and they are like tiny little potatoes. They taste very much like potato. What's that, John, Forest London? That was years ago. Oh. Was that a comment about the outrageously terrible piles you had? I can't see. It's gone. Can be internal. Wildwood sea can be used internally. Well, yeah. Plants for future. I've mentioned this a lot of times. It's such a great resource. You can look up plants. So you could put this plant in by common name, lesser celandine, possibly on the alternative common name of pilewort, or as ranunculus ficaria, and it will come up with all its food uses, medicinal uses. So that really is my favourite go-to kind of online resource for looking up kind of plants in terms of edibility and herbal use and all the rest of it. I prefer books or talking to people. That's always good. But the sun has just burst out, and that's kind of good because it just kind of reminds me about what I really wanted to come here to talk about today, mainly. A real shift in focus. And that's that, this is a good example that, some people think, oh, like Fergus, he's like an amazing forager. He's like so connected with the natural world. He's, so connected with nature. And, relative to some people, perhaps, or, partly that's because I'm possibly lucky enough to live in a place where I can get out into lovely wild places, and obviously what I do too. But sometimes what I do, particularly as I mentioned, looking from kind of root to tip, and then, taking a plant and working with it in a way which is like very practical, very logical, very rational, very heady, can be very useful. Like, so, what I would do is think about the root, think about every other part, all the parts I mentioned before. They're like kind of the multiple parts of a plant as it goes through the season. But the other thing I would do is, think about how they would have been cooked cross-culturally, think how they would have been cooked historically. So it's just lots and lots of kind of thinking when I'm kind of out and I'm kind of encountering plants, meeting plants. So the question is, really, am I kind of meeting them? Am I encountering them? I guess I am, but is there like a fuller way of doing that? One that's less kind of heady, less busy? Because sometimes I think, doing all that, although it's very practical in terms of learning and thinking about getting the best out of a wild plant in terms of food or medicine, perhaps, can actually be quite disconnecting. It's surprising. I mean, it took me quite a few years to realise that. So what I'd really like to do is talk about another approach. Now, that's a much more, well, it's basically getting out of the head and getting more into the body, more into heart, more into the kind of feeling sense. And I think now is such a good time to do the kind of practices that I'm going to introduce you to right now, just because the current situation has meant, for a lot of people, life has slowed down. Of course, we might be kind of locked in with in a household that's quite noisy and there's kind of kids around, but I think also there is that opportunity when we might not be kind of rushing around going to work in the same way that we did before. So certainly where I am, like the sky isn't full of planes all the time, so there is a sense where there's the opportunity now to kind of slow down, kind of be quieter, and actually explore the practices that do benefit from that kind of slowing down. So I'd like to introduce a wonderful book that I've been reading recently. So I've been doing more reading recently too. And it's called Evolutionary Herbalism. I think if I just show it to you, it'd probably be backwards, but unless I did work out how to flip these things around. Yeah, Evolutionary Herbalism by Sajah Popham. And what I could read you is just basically a page. And this is about learning plants by heart. And I don't just mean like learning names by heart, so you might kind of memorize things, but really connecting in a different way. And the exercise that he's got here, it's just part of a larger exercise. And in fact, like the larger exercise the preliminary to this is actually a lot of the stuff I've been talking about, which is very, it's using all the senses, like using a sense of taste, a sense of touch, a sense of smell and sound that we had at the beginning as well. And so that's one way of starting to engage with the plants. But yeah, not in a, you know, mentally breaking down the plant into all its parts and what I can do and, you know, that busyness. But yeah, more gentle kind of sensory practice. And then, yeah, it goes on to develop this practice. But I think I'll kind of read it to you. And if you've not done anything like this, this is a very specific in instructions. And what I'd say is, like, although I would encourage this kind of plant encounter, you don't have to do this all the time, because actually, because we kind of do live in a culture that's very kind of energetically very busy, and we're very busy in our heads, actually it can take, to do something like this well, it can take quite some time just to kind of settle down, like to be quiet enough internally, like mentally, and to actually to do this as well. So I was feeling my own sense of frenetic busyness, just trying to communicate this, because I'm quite excited about it as well. So I'll just read this and encourage you to try out this practice. But yeah, a simpler form, or one that yeah, can kind of lead into it, is actually just a shorter practice where you're just sitting by some plants like this ash here, these mushrooms, or the other plants that are kind of here, which I'm going to talk about as we actually go for a walk in a minute. Is you can just sit with them for a few minutes and just relax. Actually, just take some time to kind of breathe and yeah, just feel into yourself, and then, you know, just enjoy the plant, enjoy how it looks, how it feels, just to be with it. But yeah, here's a snippet of the practice which I'll read. So it's learning plants by heart. Now, by the way, there's some language here you might think, wow, what does he mean by coherence, or it's not my kind of language, or I'm not quite sure. But don't let those things get in the way of, you know, make the words your own, or explain it as you like. But do try something like this, and it just become part of your repertoire, part of your toolbox for working with plants and learning about plants. So here we are, learning plants by heart. After consciously engaging in sensory awareness, we move into the next layer of our plant communication by tuning ourselves to the heart of the plant. To do this, we must first attune ourselves to our own heart. Allow your physical body to relax and be held by the earth. Slow and deepen your breathing, and reorientate your perception into your chest to directly activate a state of heart coherence. Then, from your internal coherence, consciously engage your heart with the plant. Radiate outward, stretching yourself out from your chest, reaching towards the plant to non-physically touch it. Wrap your heart field around the plant and trace its contours with your feeling. Breathe it into your center, and in turn, breathe your center into it. Each inhalation brings the plant closer to you, and each exhalation brings you closer to the plant. Focusing on the plant in this way, from a place of internal coherence, begins the process of entrainment as you fine-tune your heart field like a dial on a radio, moving through the static until you feel the right station. I'm not sure about entrainment here. Maybe it's an American usage, or it's just essentially like a fine-tuning. In this attunement process, there comes a point where you feel a certain click, a distinct sensation that you and the plant are synchronized with each other. You notice this arrival by a sigh, a warmth in the chest, a softening of the gaze, and a subtle but noticeable shift in consciousness. An etheric bridge is established between you and the plant as you enter a sort of waking dream. This moment of initial harmonization with the plant is accompanied by a distinct tonal hue feeling. This subtle feeling, always difficult to put into words, must become the focus of your perception. The more you are aware of these feelings, the stronger they become, as your heart takes a weak electromagnetic signal and strengthens it. When you focus on this feeling, you are watering this inner sensation so it can grow. You pour the totality of your awareness into it, allowing it to wash over your entire being, bathing every cell in your body. As this feeling received from the plant grows, it becomes all that you are aware of. Now there's much more, but I'll just read the last short paragraph because it's kind of really quite important and very important. These delicate tones, the subtle impressions made upon your heart, are the non-linear semantics received from the plant's electromagnetic field. They are living forms of meaning, the unique syntax and diction of the plant. This is the crucial bit. Yet they are merely your first impressions, the beginnings of your relationship. You can't expect to reach the essence of the plant the first time you do this. Just as it's rare to meet a person and have her reveal her deepest secrets in the first hour of conversation. As with any relationship, this process takes time and commitment. So certainly one thing that a lot of us are finding we have now, and often in a joyful way, it's not all negative what's going on, that we do have more time. So yeah, I would encourage you to kind of explore these kind of methods, other approaches to relating to plants. But what I'd like to do is actually this plant. Before I started, I sat with a plant that's just out of the screen here before, and I've got to know it in a different way than I have in the past. But let's look at it more conventionally, because it's a gorgeous plant. Turn this around and have a look. Look at these leaves. And some of you might recognize this, particularly if you grow kind of fruit and vegetables. And particularly as well, if I show you the flower, which is, so it's kind of quite a woody, kind of flexible but woody plant. And where's those flowers? Here they are. See those? Let's get it into focus. Get that into focus. You see, it's like a five petaled, and they kind of hang down. And what will come from these flowers will kind of hang down in what I think is one of the most beautiful things that you can come across in the wood in kind of June, early July, kind of throughout July, and that's like the ruby jewels that you come across of wild redcurrant, which is what this is, and it tends to grow in quite damp woodland, damp places in the woodland. And yeah, it's interesting. You often get, I mean, really, really lovely, dense kind of clusters of fruit. And, you know, pretty much the same as the cultivated variety. But I know the ones that my friend cultivates in her garden, there was a little bit bigger. And I do wonder, actually, if you gathered a few seeds from the wild and you grew these plants, they would be as big as the cultivated variety. But for me, when I come across these in the woodland, it's just a absolute treat, and I just eat a few and just, yeah, appreciate the intensity of flavour. And the wayside kind of nibble. A lot of what I do is I kind of walk around a bit like a goat and nibble at things. So I think I might take, I don't know, I'll keep this in this tripod for a bit. But so there's some other plants I saw here. Again, there we are in a damp kind of fairly shady woodland. The sun's burst through, but it's still kind of quite shaded most of the time, or sort of dappled shade. You can see we're passing through absolutely gorgeous clump of well, it's not really a clump, it's many clumps. It's a sea, really, of a gorgeous green sea of wild garlic, which I think I'm going to talk quite a lot about on Monday, actually. Really kind of go into working with it in a specific way. Some of the leaves of hawthorn bursting out. This is I'll do my best goat impression. You can see, I often do this on my own, not just to entertain. So I'm in danger of falling flat on my face. Going through this here. Aha! I've spotted something. You know, maybe it's too sunny to see. If you can see, where is it? It's over there. It's a different kind of yellow-green. And wow, look at this in the sunshine. Pick a little bit. Get into focus. It's in focus. Yeah, actually, oh, we see some lower leaves. Yeah, some lower leaves. See, opposite each other on the stem. So yeah, this is a lovely kind of salad plant called opposite-leaved golden saxifrage. And it's one of those ones I can never ever remember the botanical name. Chrysoplenum, I don't know, I really don't know, but it doesn't matter. It's opposite-leaved golden saxifrage, as opposed to alternate leaves, opposite leaf. And it's one of those plants that I'd love to put in a salad, just because it's so bright and cheery. And like flavour-wise, it's got a great texture. It's a really great texture. It's it is somewhat tannic, so to my palate, I wouldn't want a whole bowl of opposite leaf golden saxifrage, but it's wonderful. You know, when I'm making a salad, I really like to sometimes balance flavour. Sometimes I'll just have like a salad of really mild things, just like, I don't know, chickweed and lime leaves, and then some really pungent leaves, wild garlic or wild rocket or sorrel or something like that. But any time when I'm making a salad, I do think it's a nice thing to balance out the flavours. So you have the bitter and you have the slightly tannic, you have the pungent, you have the mild. Just a whole celebration of kind of wild flavours on the plate in the salad. So got what I showed you was in flower. That's just the leaves. Doesn't really focus very well here, does it? There's another way of doing this. Not really. Anyway, opposite leaf golden saxifrage, you can kind of look that up. But I think what I will show you is, because some of you are mentioning that it's a little bit, looks a bit spurge-like, which is kind of interesting. I was kind of hoping someone would say that, because I used to think that as well. So if you're wondering what I'm talking about, spurge or euphorbia, that's actually, and I wonder if any of you spotted this, I don't know, maybe it wasn't easy to see, but one of the plant that I've had in my pocket all this time, I picked just on the edge of the woodland, and it's a spurge. So the most common one you'll find in the woodland is wood spurge, and I guess it's just like the tonal character of the greens, the kind of lighter flower, and then I've got very different plants. I'm going to put this in the shade so you can kind of see better. Is there any shade? Look, let's go over to some shade over here. And that's better. Yeah, look at that. So look at that kind of tone. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of differences here. The spurge, and I don't think this is wood spurge actually, because it is in a more sunny location and it was with a whole load of cultivated plants. Maybe it's sun spurge or another spurge. Now spurge, euphorbia is the genus, and they often have, and it's because it's probably dried out now, but they have a latex, quite a lot of white latex that can kind of irritate the skin. Oh, you can't see it now. Actually, that's a good point, because when you're using latex as one feature to observe when you're picking a plant, often, I mean, this is only an hour since I picked this or something like that, an hour and a half, but it's dried out. When I picked it, it was dripping white latex. And with fungi and plants, when you're looking for that feature, you really want to use it with fresh material you've just picked, and to see how it's changed if you know what latex euphorbia is like. When it's really kind of flowing when you've just picked it. But yeah, opposite leaf golden saxifrage. I remember years ago, because this wasn't really on my kind of list of edibles. I kind of seen it around and kind of knew what it was, but didn't really kind of like it that much. But I don't know, sometimes it just takes people you respect to just give you an extra incentive to try things. And I remember watching the wonderful series on wild food with ethnobotanist, now sadly departed, Gordon Hillman, and the wonderful Ray Mears. And I remember Ray Mears picking some opposite leaf golden saxifrage and tasting it and saying how delicious it was. I always thought, like, really? And then he used that great kind of catch-all that I I'm guilty of before that and still use, which is guilty really, but it's like, yeah, a very good plant, great in salads and full of vitamin C. I think Ray Mears said, which you can say of so many greens, but it's a good one. Anyway, put that in your salad if you find it in a clean spot. Oh, I can see down here, and it's showing that it's a damp kind of woodland. And I mentioned this in another video, and so flowers of cardamine pratensis, or cuckoo flower, lady's smock, really pungent, mustardy plant, member of the cabbage family. Wow, it's 4 kind of petals that open like a cross. Yeah, cardamine pratensis generally means of the of the meadow. Often damp meadows are this time of year or a bit later when it gets more consistently sunny. You can see just absolutely covered in beautiful blooms of lady smock, cuckoo flower, but often by woodland streams where I'm kind of heading to now. You see it too. Years ago, when I used to sell wild food before I realised the error of my ways, or just found it more enjoyable taking people out to actually encounter the plants where they are. I supplied some restaurant in London, and they used to use the flowers, gosh, this was going back 12, 13 years in ice cream. I mean, there's so many things you can put in ice cream, but I just remember arriving and the chef showing us this ice cream and just eating rather a lot of it because it was delicious. But well, that's the thing with wild food. You can use it in its most obvious way, or you get really kind of creative and do things that are quite unusual. Now earlier, there we are. Now look down here. This brings me so much joy. And it might surprise you what brings me so much joy. In fact, I'm going to take this off so you can see more clearly. You can see this kind of rises out of, it's just one single stem coming out of the ground, out of the earth. Unlike, like you get kind of ferns growing in kind of clusters, like kind of rosettes of leaves shooting up. But bracken doesn't do that. It just, although it's connected underneath the ground by a whole kind of network of rhizomes, the individual bracken fronds just grow from one stem. And what I really love about it is just apart from its kind of manner of just kind of rising up to kind of look up at the sun like that, it's just, look at that, it's just so claw-like interesting appearance. And it's funny because I used to think, there's another one right over there. I mean, there's lots of them are just appearing now. But look at this one. It's slightly bigger. It's just kind of opening up a bit. See? But it's a real kind of grasping, kind of claw-like aspect to it. It's one that's much more opened up there, look. And yeah, this gets kind of into the meanings of botanical names. I mean, I've talked in other videos about how botanical name is actually really kind of useful to know. I think I talked about Conine maculatum, hemlock, and Arum maculatum, which is lords and ladies, but the maculatum part kind of meaning spotted or kind of blotched, and referring to the purple blotches on the stem of hemlock and the black blotches on the leaves of lords and ladies. So sometimes it indicates, the Latin indicates something kind of really interesting, and I remember reading about the meaning of this, not in just kind of online, and also like friends telling me that, and I can never pronounce this. So yeah, maybe someone knows, but how do you pronounce a P and a T together? Is it a silent P? Pteridinium aquilinum, or Pteridium aquilinum, or Pteridium aquilinum. But anyway, I had to look that up. I had to write it down in like little card on this book. because I knew I'd forget. But this book here I've got is such a wonderful book, and for quite a few months, some years ago, I had it on just on the side of my bed, and I'd wake up in the night, I'd just kind of start reading it, or just before bed I'd read it. And it's a wonderful book, and it's by David Gledhill, and it's called The Names of Plants. It's like the 4th edition, like The Names of Plants, kind of looks like that. And what's really wonderful, it has the botanical terms, whether they're the Latin or of Greek origin or whatever, and it's a simple dictionary really, and it has the meanings. And so, like the first meaning, the pteridium or pteridium simply means like small fern, but it's the other part that I really like, which is, let's have a look at this. The aquilinium part of the name of fern, because I always thought that from being told or just seeing it myself, that kind of grippy bit of the leaf that looks so claw-like as just before it fully opens out is why it got its name, because aquilinum or aquilegia, as we have here, or aquilina, or aquilinum, like all different endings that are used botanically to describe various plants, just simply means of eagles, and or eagle-like. And then I remember I got this book, and it says Linnaeus noted that in the obliquely cut rhizome, I mentioned the rhizomes, the underground kind of storage parts really of pteridium, the appearance of the vasculature, and that's just like the kind of inside, I guess. Well, normally when I think of vasculature, I think of kind of veins, but if he's talking about the rhizome, no, it's kind of, I guess it does have, it does transport nutrients, I guess, but the ones I've seen, they don't have obvious like but any vascular bundles in there, anything like that. Anyway, he suggests that when you cut that to some extent it looks like the imperial eagle. Like how? I mean, I've cut these before and I'm not quite sure what he means, but certainly the kind of grippy part of the leaf is like some kind of bird of prey. But what I thought is so topical right now is with the coronavirus, and so, I mean, there's so much, it's so much in the news, so much information, like information overload about it, but also it's really brought up for a lot of people. It's like, what sources of information do we trust? Do we trust the conventional views which we might see on the BBC or the national press, or do we believe, you know, various alternative or competing perspectives that we might hear from friends or discover online? And it can be a real challenge. It can be quite overwhelming, and it's really often the case with wild foods as well, because I mean, I've been working with wild food for about 30 years now, and I do a lot of research myself. But you know, it's very time consuming. So you know, sometimes you do want to have a shortcut, and then it comes to well, who do you trust? Who do you trust to have done the research? And you know, very often has done the research, and somewhere you will see like references to the, you know, the articles, or what also sources that they've drawn on themselves. But it comes down to trust, and that's particularly the case when you're working with plants that can be slightly controversial. So one person who's written about eating bracken, and by the way, when we talk about eating bracken, is there is a tradition of eating it, particularly in Korea and Japan, where I'm trying to get the sun out of my face, where it's oh, look, I've got even more sunset, but it's like more even. Look, I got a nice even tan. Yeah, so in Korea, Japan, there's a long tradition of eating bracken fronds in the spring, and there's various recipes for that you can kind of find online. But the concern with bracken is that there are substances in there that are associated with various cancers, be it throat cancer, other cancers, I believe, as well. So, yeah, who do you trust in terms of saying how it can be eaten safely? This is the question. And there's an American forager I really like. I mean, there's quite a few really good in this country, but in America as well. And one I really like in America is a guy called Hank Shaw. So I encourage you to look up this article. I believe if you just Google Hank Shaw and how to safely eat bracken fern, you'll come up with a really nice article about it, which covers it in detail, which I've been talking long enough, so I don't really want to go into now. So I would like you to, if you are interested in exploring the use of bracken, to check out Hank Shaw and his excellent article on how to safely eat bracken fern. But essentially, and look at the details, essentially it comes down to boiling in hot salted water to lessen, to radically lessen any compounds that could do you harm, and also down to kind of portion size and being sensible. And getting it in perspective as well, like realising that, there's lots of things that give us, or can kind of lead to cancer, like unhealthy lifestyles, burnt toast. And it kind of comes down also to another thing I'd like to kind of mention, which is that for me, gathering wild food, I'm just going to get a jar, tell you about that. Gathering wild food is about not always just and purely like the flavour and textures and aromas. I mean, of course, that's like so important, but it's about like the story. So so when I'm collecting bracken shoots in the spring, and then I've cooked them appropriately, like the journey to get that, the people that I'm with often picking these things, and like the fun we had, and like the learning that's gone into it, the research I've done, and the experiments I've done, these all flow into like the final flavour, the final eating experience of that wild food, in this case bracken. And so it's just another kind of dimension to thinking, well, flavour isn't just the overt flavour that a food might objectively have. There's many more things that feed into creating a really wonderful eating experience, and the stories that come from actually going and sourcing your food is a really great way to add an extra kind of dimensional flavour, if you like, to the food. So one thing I was exploring, because I do a lot of lacto fermentation, which is fermenting plants just using salt and the natural lactobacillus which is on the plant. But I was really curious that, because, and it's part of the ongoing exploration for me, is when things come in abundance, plants come in abundance, particularly in the spring when I think of all the leafy greens, but then of course you've got the fruits of the summer and seeds of autumn, and then roots and fungi. Obviously, it's like, they all have their seasons, and those seasons in nature are so abundant. There's such richness on offer. But how do you preserve those things? Of course, it's a great point is that, well, things come in season and you enjoy them, and then they go out of season and you enjoy the thing that's coming in season next. Absolutely. But also, if there's an opportunity to explore just putting a little bit down for storing and learning about traditional preserving techniques, and I'm all for embracing those kind of things, and especially if it involves a little bit of experimentation. So what I did is, rather than kind of lacto ferment these here, I just put them in a super saturated brine. I'm just going to open this. And what I discovered is, I'll try not to knock this whole jar over. This could well happen if you see it tipping. That'll be the last laugh of the bracken. I shall hold the jar. Hold jar. And look at this. So we find one that's kind of at the same stage. You can see any at the same stage. It's not like hundreds around here. Just a few dotted around. That's what I guess roughly the one we saw earlier. So there we are. Look, last spring's bracken and this spring's bracken. Colour has changed slightly, but in all other respects it's pretty much as it was when I picked it. I mean, it's softened very slightly. So what I've discovered, which is great with these, is, I mean, it's very salty now, but I put them in a bowl of water and then I kind of leave them overnight. And then, actually, usually I tip that water away and then I leave them for like another kind of 12 hours. So basically a day in 2 changes of water. And then I will just kind of cook them in, boiling salted water very briefly, and then blanch them, and then they're kind of good to go. So, yeah, I think this is like the longest video I've made so far. I think from now on I'm going to really endeavour to try and stick to an hour. But what I will do, and I've worked out how to kind of put these on YouTube now, I'll do that thing that all organised people do, and I'm really endeavouring with this to be more organised, is that I don't know what you call it, but where you say what I'm talking about at various points, so you don't have to listen to a whole load of stuff that may not interest you, and you can just forward to where you want to listen to. So that's it from this gorgeously sunny woodland, which is so different from we started. I mean, it's lovely how we started, but I just want to show you this view, because in about a few weeks, no, I would say, I mean, they're starting to come out now, but in about, I'd say a week, 10 days, possibly 2. I mean, this place here, look at that, is going to be absolutely carpeted in, guess what, no, not wild garlic flowers, but if you are thinking that, because it is a sea of green, but yeah, it's a sea of green of bluebells. So from this beautiful bluebell wood, till next time, Monday at 10, I bid you farewell and good day.